going, guys? My name is Andrew. I am your host. Today, we are going to talk about a few dynasty trades that has happened in the Angle Dynasty Basketball League. It is a 30-team real salary league. So before we get started, I have not one, but two people to introduce today. So first off, my co-host, Mitchell from Angle. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well, man. Excited to record. And, even tomorrow, we're going golf tomorrow. So let's hit it off and let's start off
Exactly.
strong. Yeah.
Very good. And I'm also very honored to welcome our first guest to the show. So he is participating in the Angle League. Also, in honor of him, this is the first episode with the signed Sengun jersey in the background. So Mark from Sports Ethos, how's it going, man? Welcome.
It's going good, Andrew. It's already been a pleasure to be in this league, see all the action that's going on and all the conversations. So props to you all. I think you all are hosting a great league, and it's a pleasure to be on here discussing it.
Always a pleasure to have a fellow London soccer club fanatic as well. So we are super fans of fierce rivals in the Premier League, and that was kind of just what got our communication started between each other. A little trash talk during the regular season, but it blossomed into a great partnership here with just dynasty analysis, bouncing some trade ideas off of each other, and now we're going to get some content going for you guys too. So let's dive into these trades. So we are here for the first trade. Again, just a reminder, we got some crazy team names. We gave a lot of freedom. You can name your team after any male or female professional basketball club. So this in our league involves the Singapore Slingers and Blackwater Bossing. So the Singapore Slingers sent Dyson Daniels, Isaiah Hartenstein, and pick 43. Blackwater sent Mark Williams, Dalen Terry, and a future 2025 second round pick. Let's start off with you, Mitchell. What do you think about this trade?
So essentially, let's say in a typical dynasty evaluation, you're sending two guys around like the top 120 for a guy that's in the top 60. But in salary, it makes things a little bit more complicated because there's different ways to evaluate this trade because of that. So Dyson Daniels, former lottery pick, he's making 6 mil or 8 mil these next 2 years. But what makes it really interesting is Isaiah Hartenstein. So apparently there's going to be a very competitive bidding war with multiple different teams. So one is Oklahoma City Thunder, where we're hearing he's about to make, or he could make as much as $20 million a year. And I do want to give a little caution to, acquiring an Isaiah Hartenstein. He played in Tom Thibodeau's system with a very injury-riddled roster with, no Julius Randle, no Mitchell Robinson for most of the year. So a lot of his numbers of this current season, he was playing 35 minutes a night. And are we going to see that in OKC or another team? Maybe OKC because of that need for a traditional five who can kind of pass it, play within the system. But we're probably not going to see that peak fantasy stat line that we saw to end the year. I also really love Mark Williams. Personally, I have multiple stocks of him. Andrew, you know that. You've been in multiple dynasty leagues with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is, a for sure top 50 producer, but when healthy. So we don't know if Mark Williams is going to finally be able to string along a season of 50 games, so we don't know that. So I think on surface, it is a wash. I don't really have a favorite, but I can see it both ways. So I was wondering what you think, Mark, on this trade.
I definitely hear both sides of that. And I mean, especially with Isaiah Hartenstein, we don't know what his contract is going to be. I think we can say it's a good range from that 13, 14 million if he stays with the Knicks up to 21 million if he leaves for another team. So, I mean, there's a little bit of unexpectancy there, but I think there's a decent range we can nail down. So I think it just depends. When we're talking salary, so much is context, so much is can you absorb the salary for the production? And so if you can fit in Isaiah Hartenstein in his expected contract, then I do kind of like that. Mark Williams, we've seen some nebulous and murky injury reporting. Charlotte doesn't have the most refined injury reporting. I think we all know that. if we've been following Mark Williams, LaMelo Ball, Cody Martin even. And so can we be sure that Mark Williams is going to be good enough or play enough on those 2 years of his rookie contract? Maybe. I think we all like his per minute production and think he can be a solid starting center, give you those center stats. But I don't know if we can feel fully confident in that. So as you were saying, I think it's a little bit of a wash as long as I believe Singapore Singlers can absorb Isaiah Hartenstein's contract, which they've been making a lot of moves. I think they have that in mind. So
It's actually Blackwater is taking on Hartenstein.
well, I think Blackwater Bossing then has kept that in mind and
Yeah.
and knows that that's probably the expected range for Isaiah Hartenstein and can go from there. And I mean, we've kind of been talking about more Hartenstein and Mark Williams here. I mean, Dyson Daniels is important, a little bit of maybe balancing that upside of Mark Williams and the cheapness, and so balancing that out. And then pick 43 for Dalen Terry and the 25-second. I mean, okay, little chip-ins here, little small things, but that's not really the crux of this deal.
Yeah, I agree. And, one thing, like with Mitchell mentioned, how we're not sure what's going to happen with Hartenstein's minutes. I mean, I'd have to think how this bidding war is going on with Hartenstein, if it's going to get up to the 20s in regards to million of dollars that he's going to get paid per year, I figured he's going to have a pretty good role. It doesn't make a ton of sense to pay somebody $20 million to be a backup center. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to lean slightly towards the Hartenstein side if the contract situation get figured out. I mean, I don't want to bring team context into it too much because people aren't able to pull up this league immediately, but I know Blackwater has some big contracts on there. But Dyson's a good piece and might be what kind of tips it in the favor of the Hartenstein side for me, because it's like, yeah, he's a lot of money, but Dyson's a good piece to have. And then we're all kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with New Orleans. Will CJ ever leave? Will Brandon Ingram ever leave? Pretty much just everyone's kind of keeping a very close eye on those two players. Pretty close trade, maybe leaning a little bit to one side, but it was a good one to get us started off. So now we have our next trade to bring up. So we got these trades on here in chronological order. This one involves me, actually. All right. So in this league, I am Real Madrid. So I'm representing the basketball side of the club. This one also involves the Singapore Slingers. I think you'll see him come up a couple of times in this one. All right. So in the startup draft, I took pick 5 overall. I think I took that in round 4. There was a few guys that I really wanted on my list in round 4 who both got sniped pretty close ahead of where I picked. Bilal was one of them, and then the one I had ahead of that was Deni Avdija. So I wanted either one of those two really badly, and both got picked, I think, within 4 or 5 spots of when I eventually did pick. So I gave a little bit in this second round pick with pick 5 to receive Bilal Coulibaly. As Mitch and I started to study more for the big board video, which we're going to be doing soon, it kind of scared me out of this pick a little bit. So I wanted to go with somebody who I think has good upside in Bilal, someone who I know has grown over the summer. He's still 19 years old, and he's added an inch to his height and his wingspan, probably going to eventually put on a little bit more weight too, naturally. So Mitch, let's start with you. What do you think about me bailing on the draft this year to take somebody who did come from a very hyped draft class last year?
Yeah, we talked about this trade, leading up to the execution of it. And we were really set on, that projected top 4 tier of the 2024 NBA draft, right? So there's Alex Sarr, Reed Shepherd, who we really like, Donovan Clingan, and Nikola Topic. And we weren't so certain about that next tier of players, So I do believe that Bilal Coulibaly would be within that 2 to 4 range in this year's draft. So why not take a guy who already had that development year? He already was, putting up fantastic defensive numbers and something that will translate on a per minute basis to a very depleted Washington Wizards team that may, ultimately get rid of Kyle Kuzma, bring in more assets, draft assets, and Bilal Coulibaly can become, potentially a 3rd or 4th option. But that's not really what we're what you're buying him for, right? You're buying him for those defensive stats. Anything on the offensive input is just an added bonus. And Kuzma leaving potentially this offseason opens up that avenue, which can give him an even higher trade value than pick 5 by the end of this 2024-2025 season. So I do think this is a good gamble on your end, but I also want to hear what Mark thinks. But as of now, I do kind of lean towards your side as of now if those other 4 players, don't drop to pick 5 that we mentioned.
I'm pretty much with you, Mitchell, on the Bilal Coulibaly evaluation where, yeah, the defensive stats I think should be there, and the counting stats will depend on minutes, and then whatever offensive stuff you get, that's pretty much gravy on top. Will it come? I mean, who knows? We'll see if the shooting comes around. We'll see if some of the on-ball skills come around. That's very much a work in progress. Thing about pick 5 and rookie drafts is that we'll have the rookie draft probably here in month and a half, some weeks after the NBA draft takes place and then sometime later in the off season. And who knows where these picks are going to land? Who knows, if these landing spots are going to provide more immediate production, or maybe you have to be more patient with some of these rookies. And so it's still a little bit of a mystery box, even though we can have a assumption of how these rookies are going to fall in big board. We all know that's going to change slightly. It might be small shifts, but they'll change slightly once the draft picks are actually made. So I wonder if sending out pick 5, you can get, maybe I've gotten a little bit more juice than Bilal Coulibaly. I don't know how much juice he has, for lack of a better term, in terms of, I guess, ultimate upside, like how high can he actually rise? But at the end of the day, this is pretty much a preference trade for me, and just Singapore slingers may be cashing in a little bit on that Coulibaly stock and just going for something with even more wider range of outcomes. It's very much a dealer's choice here for me. I don't think that that extra year on the rookie contract with pick 5 versus Coulibaly, I mean, I think that's pretty, again, that's talking 3 years versus 4 years. So much can change in a salary league in that time. I don't think that's even too much of a consideration here.
All fair points, and definitely a fair point too that pick 5 could probably have a little bit more of amplified value if I had waited until actual draft day, or maybe a day or two prior, as opposed to a few weeks out. All right, so let's bring us now to our next pick that happened. This is our first big salary move that happened. So this one involved Vélez Sarsfield, representing an Argentinian team, and the New York Knicks, who are actually commissioned by a couple of guys from Point Made Basketball. So Vélez Sarsfield sent out Pascal Siakam and Jeremy Sochan for pick 20, in addition to pick 21, pick 40, and a 2025 second round pick. So that's Siakam, Sochan, 2 and 3 picks. They received, so the New York Knicks sent Bam Adebayo and TJ McConnell. So let's go over to you, Mitch. What do you think about our first big money deal that went down here with some big contracts involved?
Yeah, this is a tough one, Andrew, only because, Pascal Siakam, he just led them as their leading scorer for the Indiana Pacers to the Eastern Conference Finals. He's in line for a major, major payday. So that's what makes it interesting. His numbers on Indiana have actually, I believe, dipped since the Toronto Raptors, since he's playing with a lot more offensive talent versus a really depleting and tanking roster as Detroit was sending out OG Anunoby and onward. They're in a whole rebuilding process. So if Pascal Siakam makes around like $45 million, I don't really know if I like that side. I know what's his name? Jeremy Sochan is a nice up and coming young star. He has a really diverse stat set. We kind of think of him as a mini Draymond Green, but we don't know because San Antonio has 2 incoming lottery picks 4 and 8, who can soak up some of Sochan's minutes, especially on the offensive end where he had a lot of touches as a facilitator. Spurs are likely to draft a point guard moving forward, potentially Stephon Castle. So we don't know if his stock, or for a better term, assists are going to be there. Pick 21 is nice, and pick 40 is it could be a hit or miss depending on how well your evaluation is. But I think I do prefer the LA. Sorry, Andrew, can you? What's his
Velez
name?
Sarsfield.
Velez Sarsfield. Sorry, there's so many different international names. I have trouble keeping up. Velez Sarsfield. Bam Adebayo has a pretty nice contract given he is a top 30 producer, making under $35 million a year. And TJ McConnell, he's an underrated asset. He's really showed out to be a great per minute producer. He only needs around 20 to 25 minutes to really hit top 100 numbers. He has great steals. He has great efficiency, good assists on a per minute basis. And he really established himself even playing behind Andrew Nembhard and Halliburton, that he could put up some really nice and juicy numbers. And for context, in another league, TJ McConnell has been traded for, late teens picks. So he's a very valuable and coveted guy. Maybe that is benefiting from some of that Indiana postseason hype. But I think value-wise, I do love the Bam and TJ side a bit more, considering Siakam's contract extension.
What do you think about this one, Mark?
I don't know if I'm as, lean one way or the other. And maybe it's boring to say I think a lot of these trades are in the realm of like, yeah, this is in the realm of balance or even for me. I think if this was not thinking about the salary aspect for a second, if you were to go from Siakam to Bam, okay, Sochan I think is a pretty decent add there to get to that point. And then I think the picks package of 2140 to 25 second, okay, that gets you kind of to the McConnell range. So I think kind of thinking of it that way a little bit. So when we're thinking about the salaries, though, I mean, Siakam's unrestricted. I'm sure there was some talks between himself and the Pacers when that trade was made, which of course would be illegal, but I'm sure some talks were made. But I don't know if Siakam's going to get, the 4-year, maybe a 4-year max, or if he's going to go maybe 5 years at a bit lower of a salary per year. And I mean, that could be a difference of, you're talking 35 to 38 million versus 40 to 43 million per year, which, I mean, that's $8 million difference. That's a decent role player who can provide value in a fantasy league. And so when I think you look at that, I think the Bam certainty of the contract for 2 more years at about that 35 million per year that Mitchell mentioned, I think it gives a little bit more security where I feel confident with that. And I feel more confident of Bam as a higher tier player than Siakam, with just all the other, usage players and all the offensive touches in that Pacer system. I mean, yeah, I think that was a good point that, Siakam's numbers did actually dip a little bit on the Pacers. Not dramatically, the efficiency rose a little bit, but some of the counting stats did drop a little bit. And if we're going to see that continuing just a little bit as he ages, then I think you'd rather have the more certain asset in Bam.
Yeah, I mean, it's because like Bam's already ranked ahead of Siakam on probably across the board on dynasty rosters or dynasty lists in the first place. And then so you factor that in, and then also you're going to factor in the fact that he's going to be making probably a good amount less money and is locked into that for a couple of years. Eventually, he might make at or pretty near what Siakam's making, but not for a little bit. So that gives a lot of juice to the Bam side, in my opinion. McConnell's a great piece to have too. But there is a lot of flexibility with I trust this Knicks side to work with the flexibility of Sochan and those picks. His contract and those picks, especially if they decide to move them on draft day, they can definitely make some things happen there. And they can also potentially get lucky. Maybe Siakam gets kind of lowballed and he only ends up on like 38 million or something like that. It doesn't look as bad as 45. Obviously, the more likely thing is going to be over 40, but sometimes this type of thing happens in the NBA. But we'll see if they get lucky on that one. But they do have a little flexibility with the smaller contracts on that side. But I might lean slightly towards the Bam side. But it's a good sign as to what Mark mentioned, how it's kind of hard for us to pick sides. Maybe we just slightly lean one way, but we get why the other side made that move, which is just a sign of, intelligent owners being in the league. So this is all good things. I don't think we've really seen, at least as the commissioner, I'm sure Mitch can probably attest to this, we haven't really seen an egregious trade where we're like going, when we have to click on the approve button, So everything's been pretty well balanced so far. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Mitchell, this one's yours. So you, the San Miguel Beerman, You decided to forego your stocks of Desmond Bane. So you traded with the Syracuse Nationals. You received from the Nationals Keldon Johnson, Keegan Murray, pick 27, and a 2025 first round pick. And then the Nationals received Desmond Bane. So take us behind your thought process with this move. I mean, in my opinion, I always love getting more forwards. I mentioned this in the last video with Brax. You can never have too many forwards.
Yeah, so as soon as I posted Desmond Bane on the blog, I must have received 5 different DMs from owners just because of how many people love how Desmond Bane provides no statistical weaknesses. He's very efficient. He'll give you points, threes, even some steals on low turnover. So Desmond Bane was a very highly coveted asset. And given his rookie max, which is around like 35 to 38, 40 million, for the next 4 or 5 years, he provides a lot of certainty. And moving forward, with all the cap space moving up with these revenue deals and TV deals, 35 mil or 38 mil is going to be almost nothing moving forward. So I use that as a selling point to Desmond Bane. And I just wanted to accumulate assets. So my team is young. I'm not ready to compete. I spent my first round pick on Amen Thompson. So I was really just trying to get like some cheaper and lucrative assets that I can flip moving forward and potentially gain value as we move forward into the off season and also to the season. I was able to receive Keegan Murray, who I then flipped for Jalen Green, another young stud that went top 5 2 years ago. I took Keldon Johnson. He's someone who's also on the younger side. I believe he's under 25 years old. He did net me a mid first round pick in this draft. I also got pick 27 and a future 2025 first round pick. So at this point, I'm just stockpiling assets. I want to know what you guys think in terms of the Nationals side of the deal, because this is ultimately just my perspective. So I guess we could start with you, Mark.
So I might go on a little bit of a tangent here, but I think Desmond Bane in salary leagues is a really interesting poster child for when you hit on a young rookie, not young, but a rookie pick on a rookie salary, and they do well, and they're suddenly going to get that max or a high contract, and that value shifts pretty swiftly. And Bane on rookie contract, fantastic for the past 2 seasons, absolute stellar, per production per dollar value. Now on that max you mentioned, I mean, yes, the cap is rising. It's still a good amount for someone at his production level. And I mean, I would say he's probably now going from a bargain to probably average dollar per production, if not maybe even a little worse, just with, he does provide a lot, but it's not necessarily insanely impactful except for threes. So production is what matters at the end of the day. But when you're getting Keegan Murray and then a capable depth rotation wing in Keldon Johnson, plus a 25 first, plus pick 27, that's already a lot of assets and value that you're getting, a lot of depth, and especially in the daily league where we can change out rosters and depth is going to be important. I'd probably honestly have Keegan with his 2 years of his rookie contract, let's think about 7 to 9 million next 2 years, even with Bane in a salary league. So getting everything else on top is just amazing. And I think it was really good value for you.
Thank you.
I really like Keegan too. I mean, especially when you see a good name like Bane get posted onto the block, especially because a lot of people are going to be reaching out immediately too. So someone, it might be tempting to be like, here, take everything. I want this guy. So Keldon, for now, he's on the Spurs. There's trade rumors for him. I believe his contract is still locked in with the Spurs, though. We'll see what's going on with pick 27. But really, the poster child of what you received in my end was Keegan. You did flip him for Jalen Green. I've been over this with you a million times, so I'm not going to do it again. But we're only evaluating this deal right here. So I really do like, just getting that much on top of Keegan. And I know for the situation that you're in, I'm sure you're loving being in control of, somebody else's first round pick, just stockpiling those assets like that, especially if the season I know you own multiple first round picks, and if the season doesn't go well for one of those teams, well, they might come crawling back and they're going to need to pay extra to get it back. if they want to decide to tank with it, or you're just going to benefit from them doing poorly. So this is, where the whole benefit comes in play of stockpiling future first round picks. All right, let's go on to our next trade here. So this is the final one. This is a 5-team trade. So Fantrax allows these large types of deals like this. And you rascals in the league managed to pull this pull off a 5-team trade. All right, so bear with me here. We have, first off, the Toronto Raptors are sending away Evan Mobley and Dillon Brooks, and in exchange, through all of these exchanges, he got Jayson Tatum out of this. Next up, we're going back to Mitch. So this is kind of bouncing off of the last one that just happened. Mitch took Keldon Johnson and pick 27, which he sent out. And in this exchange, he received pick 16. So he moved up 11 spots using Keldon, basically, and then also got a 2nd-round pick out of it. Our German team, Alba Berlin, he sent out pick 10, pick 16, and pick 31, and he received Dillon Brooks and pick number 5. So going back to the earlier trade between myself and Singapore, it looks like he ended up flipping pick 5. So now that's going to be at Alba Berlin. Next involved was the catalyst, the creator of this entire move, the Brisbane Bullets. Shout out to him. He sent out Jayson Tatum, Anthony Black, Jett Howard, and a 2025 2nd-round pick. His haul that he got for that was Evan Mobley, Keldon Johnson, pick 10, pick 31, and pick 43. Moving on now to the Singapore Slingers. He ended up flipping pick 5 and pick 43. He received Anthony Black, Jett Howard, and pick 27. There was a lot of player movement here, but on screen, you can just mainly look at the receiving side first, which is on the bottom side, and then you'll see what they sent on the top end here. So, a lot of people will try to tend to gravitate towards, oh, I see Jayson Tatum, the highest ranked player in the deal. I'm going to maybe lean towards him, which is fair. But also, too, we have to factor in that there's so many different contracts involved. There's a lot of rookie scale contracts moving around. So there's a lot of 2024 picks involved in this exchange. And then Anthony Black, Jett Howard, and Evan Mobley are all on rookie contracts still, too. Obviously, there's a huge haul attached to Evan Mobley that Brisbane received. So he got a top 10 pick and Keldon Johnson, in addition to 2 other picks for him to work with later on in the draft. But he did need to add to Tatum to do that. And a lot of guys, I like Anthony Black personally. I'm curious to see if Orlando ends up using Jett Howard as they should have. They spent such a bit, a top, what was he, 11?
11, yeah.
And they barely played him. So, I know some teams are gravitating towards using the G League a lot more to develop guys, kind of adopting what baseball has done all these years with the minor league system. So I get that. But let's go to you, Mark, first for this one. I know there's a lot of movement involved here, but is there a particular team or maybe 2 teams that you think benefited well from this 5-team exchange?
First off, I have to add my props to all the teams involved for getting this done. I saw this come through and I just did not know what to think initially with all different team names on Fantrax from to I was trying to figure it out, and I forgot who posted it in the trade polling channel in the Discord. Thank you for whoever did that for making it very clear. Thank you, Alba Berlin.
Yes.
And then also I think everyone shouted out Brisbane Bullets for negotiating and getting all this done. So props. And then getting to the actual trade details itself and the value. You talk about the haul that Brisbane got for Mobley or for Tatum, right? And I think I'm a little bit lower on Mobley than Dynasty consensus, but in salary, he has 1 more year of the rookie contract, and he's almost for sure getting the 25% max. I would be shocked if that doesn't get locked in the offseason. And so is he really someone who's going to be worth more than Tatum in that regard? Plus Brooks? I don't think so. I don't think that's really even close. So sending out Mobley and Brooks to get Tatum, I think is really solid value, considering Tatum is just a rock solid top 10 when you factor in reliability dynasty player. I think that's really solid. And I don't know if when you're sending out Tatum, are you getting anything that's going to approach that in terms of build around player or in the depth necessarily? I mean, Mobley obviously would be great for 1 year. I think, as we kind of touched on with Bane earlier, I think Mobley's going to dip a little bit in the salary league value. And then Keldon's fine, but there's not as much juice there. So you're kind of relying on some of those picks of pick 10, 31, and 43 to do some of that heavy lifting to make up that gap. And I just don't know if I have enough faith in rookies to do that. So, I mean, I think the Mobley Tatum side that Toronto did, I think that was just, that's what stood out for me, at least, in a trade of this magnitude. I don't know if you see it different, Mitchell or Andrew.
Yeah. Yeah, so we did pull this trade, and the Raptors side was pretty much a unanimous landslide on what they sent and what they received. I know everyone voted for Brisbane just for getting it done, but that was more so just kind of like props for setting up this deal, getting out all these negotiations to 4 other owners. But I think it is pretty telling given that trade pull, and Mark does make some great points. And, me and Andrew too, we're on the same bus that we don't believe Mobley is like a top 15 asset where he was drafted in this startup. We kind of have him around that 25 range, and you add salary into the equation. Is he really a top 25 asset next year? He might kind of dip to the top 40 range. So we don't really know, what his value holds past this year. And receiving a top 10 asset in Tatum, I think it was a no-brainer. There's just so much to digest. I guess I'll go into the Alba Berlin part, and then Andrew, you can finish us off with the Singapore Slinger side, and then my side as well. I don't know if I love that sending pick 10, 16, and 31 for pick 5 and Brooks. So the thing about this draft, anything past the top 2 or 3 picks, in my opinion, is such a wash between pick 4 to pick, I want to say 14 or 16. So, moving 2 teams picks for pick 5, I'd rather have multiple shots at the board and potentially get someone that falls just because this draft is so much wide open. And even with pick 31, people like to knock on this draft saying it's one of the weakest drafts of all time, but there is some solid depth out there that you can take at pick 31. Think of someone like Tyler Kolek with the Golden Eagles. He is a great per minute assist guy who also had some pretty good shooting splits. And he might be this year's Jaime Jaquez, potentially. I love Tyler Kolek. Andrew likes AJ Mitchell, someone who played and we saw in person around that late first, early second range. So he could be a potential steal too at pick 31. So having 2 picks in the teens and pick 31 who could be a steal later on, I think kind of sways me that way over pick 5 and Dillon Brooks, who is eventually going to be phased out as they take someone in the top 3 of this year's draft.
Yeah, great points. I mean, I was already slightly leaning towards the Toronto side anyways, receiving Tatum, but I think both you guys, specifically Mark, made me lean way more towards the Tatum side after more of that explanation. I mean, I personally was really high on Mobley for the first few years, and then pretty much like the last year I cooled off a lot. I had him as high as 10 in Dynasty, I think kind of like when we first started Angle around a year ago. And just as the year went on, he just kept dipping lower and lower in my rankings, and I was the one that believed in him the most. So that was kind of a sign there. I mean, he does put up, nice defensive stats, especially if you're going for a big man build, which no, I'm thinking of the wrong team, but especially if you're going for a big man build. But the receiving the Tatum side, I think, was the overall probably winner here. For Singapore, I do like Anthony Black, but it was kind of the same thing that I did where he probably could have capitalized more from pick 5 on actual draft day. If both Black, because he is counting on huge steps in development from both Black and then Jett Howard actually being on the actual roster and playing a lot instead of being in the G League. Pick 27, Mitch just mentioned this. There's totally some good options in that range. I actually am starting to gravitate more towards the 20s of this draft for whatever reason. I'm kind of just trying to, they're cheaper to acquire, and I feel like I can work some magic there. There's a good amount of guys near that range that I like 20s to early 30s. So if he hits on that and gets some big jumps in value, then it'll be fine. sending all that for pick 5, but again, it's kind of what I did. He maybe could have gotten more value on draft day itself. Going to Mitch, initially, I mean, right off the bat, I wasn't sure how I felt about using Keldon just to move up 11 spots. I know you're doing this for somebody specifically, so I get it. You're doing it to get your boy.
Just exposing him right here.
Second out of it. But yeah, Keldon was kind of a price to pay to move up. But I mean, I get it. Especially if this was on draft day, like actual draft day, you for sure would have had to use Keldon to move up to that spot, no doubt. But yeah, that was a pretty big one to move up there. So definite winner is the Raptors. I think your side is fine. The Albert Berlin side, I think he can potentially also flip pick 5 on draft day. So we'll see if he does that, or he'll use it. I mean, I didn't mention this earlier with Singapore, but there's totally the chance that someone goes for Risache or somebody else within the top 4. Maybe somebody gets scared off of Topic and his fake wingspan, and he falls to 5. So there's absolutely that possibility. But we'll see what happens with that one. And then a lot to work with for the Bullets there. So that covers our 5-team trade.
I do want to note on Albert Berlin. I think,
it.
as you said, Mitchell, with sending 10 and 16 for 5, that may seem steep in this draft, where you could argue it's a little flat. I know we're trying not to involve too much team context, but in that draft, they took a lot of youth in Scoot Henderson, Taylor Hendricks, and Oscar Thompson. So it just seems like, okay, let's accumulate all these young rookie salaries, and let's hope we hit on enough to be productive enough to really go all in, which I think is a risky strategy because rookies sometimes do not pan out, I think, as we all know. So you better hope those rookies hit and provide enough production on the rookie contracts to be worth it. But it's I think it was given that context of all that youth, I think it was a fair gamble and maybe an overpay, but then you get your selection of those players in that tier.
I mean, also speaking to context, that Brooks probably helps Berlin reach the salary floor too, which I'm also sure was probably some motivation there too. All right, so that does it on trades for us today. We're gonna check back in with Mark a few times throughout this season and go over some more trades for you guys. And comment down below. Let us know who you think won trades 1 through 5. Send us your trades. Let us know, or we'll let you know what we think about them. Before we go, Mark, where can the people follow you on the social medias? And also tell us a little bit about what you're doing over at Sports Ethos.
Yeah, so you can find me at MacAttack145 on Twitter. That's MACATTACK145, where I'll post some thoughts here and there, but a majority of my writings and more deeper rankings will be at sportsethos.com. Right now, we're finishing up our Dynasty Review series on all 30 teams. We'll have our draft profiles coming out here in next week or two. We'll have rookie rankings, updated Dynasty rankings after the NBA draft. And then I'm also host the Pun Intended pod, which drops weekly. Right now, we're going through our draft profiles and just going through as many prospects as we can before the draft.
Very, very good. I'd love to hear it. So make sure to go check out Sports Ethos if you're not following them already. Excellent content that you can find there. Mitchell, I'll see you on the links tomorrow, buddy.
Yep, let's do it.
Thank you for watching today, guys.